Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, working with members to find health coverage for every stage of life, helping to make care and coverage more accessible in more ways for more people across the Rochester community. Details online at excellusbcbs.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour is made in the definition of success. With the war in Iran, it is not easy to know how the Trump administration is going to define success or failure. What would be sufficient for them to end the war? What goals do they expect to achieve or demand to achieve? The answer has been changing depending upon who is speaking. Sometimes the answer changes from day to day from President Trump himself. This weekend he said that only unconditional surrender from Iran would be sufficient for the United States to end its war. Then he said that the United States might create their own definition of Iran having surrendered and simply stop fighting at some point. President Trump has said that he wants to see a new democratic regime in place in Iran, but he conceded last week that that might not happen. In his words, what we get next might be worse. The one consistent theme has been the destruction of Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities. Meanwhile, Iran's ruling clerics have chosen a new supreme leader, and he is the son of the recently assassinated Ayatollah Khamenei. He is viewed as even more hardline. Israel has vowed to kill him, too. My guest this hour will discuss what we've learned and what to look for when it comes to ending conflicts, ending wars. And that is something that Dr. Hein Humans has written about for a long time. Dr. Humans is a professor of political science, director of the Peter D. Watson Center for Conflict and Cooperation at the University of Rochester. He's the author of War and Punishment. He's written about a number of subjects related to how conflicts end in other places, like Ukraine we've talked about. And Dr. Humans, it's nice to have you back on the program. Thanks.
It's great to be here.
Dr. Randy Stone is back with us, professor of political science, director of the Skolny Center for Polish and Central European Studies at the University of Rochester. He's the author of Controlling Institutions, Lending Credibility, Satellites and Commissars, and the forthcoming book, Multinational Order. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be with you, Evan.
What's the forthcoming book about?
It's about U.S. foreign policy from the point of view of the multinational firms which helped to shape it, the international order that the United States brought, and how that evolved over time and helped to shape the population of international firms in turn.
History is moving at breakneck pace here. I mean, the problem for both of our guests is any book that they write, by the time it's published, the world order might be changing. And I'm not trying to snark at this. I mean, it's really, really remarkable.
Absolutely. In the preface to the book, I start out by saying this is a terrible time to write a book about international order.
Yeah, well, for that reason. Yeah. So I'll start with you, Dr. Stone. You know, this has been well covered. This is an administration that, apart from certain people who are working for this administration, they ran a campaign saying no war with Iran. In fact, they promised that Kamala Harris would take the United States to war with Iran, that it would be another stupid Middle Eastern adventure, that the United States was going to be done with the international destruction of wars, the loss of citizens, the devastation it causes. And we are in a very different place. In fact, I want to listen, if we could, Rob, to Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo talking about, you know, he thinks the president's on a hot streak. Let's listen.
I'm not looking for a fair fight. If we get in a fight, I want to win it. I want to win it quick. I'm in Miami. You see this hat? Free Cuba. Stay tuned. Yeah. The liberation of Cuba is upon us. It's just a matter of time now. You see this hat? Make Iran great. President Trump said the only way to make Iran great is for the people to take over. We're marching through the world. We're cleaning out the bad guys. We're going to have relationships with new people that will make us prosperous and safe. I've never seen anybody like it. This is Ronald Reagan plus. Donald Trump is resetting the world in a way nobody could have dreamed of a year ago. He is the greatest commander-in-chief of all time. Our military is the best of all time. Iran is going down, and Cuba is next.
He's marching through the world, cleaning out the bad guys. What do you think? What do you make of that, Randy?
It's incredible. I mean, Lindsey Graham used to sound like an intellectually respectable figure on the world stage, somebody who had some gravitas, who understood something about how the world worked. He often was quoted as cautioning presidents against this sort of adventurism, and here he is posturing like a cowboy. And that's the mood of this administration. That this is an administration that doesn't want to listen to anyone who gives them any advice, right? Any experts. Doesn't want to hear about any constraints about why they can't do whatever feels good at the moment. And U.S. foreign policy used to be based on long-term considerations, used to be very carefully calculated, and used to be based on a lot of expertise. There used to be a robust interagency process, which happened at multiple levels in the international government. Whenever a new foreign policy idea was brought up, it would be discussed at the deputy assistant secretary's level, and then the assistant secretary's level, and then it would go up to the deputy undersecretary's level, and then they talk about it at the undersecretary's level, and all these agencies are brought in, all these experts are consulted before it got to the point where cabinet secretaries were shooting off sound bites about it. It had been carefully vetted, and most ideas were rejected in the process because most ideas are really, really bad. Foreign policy is not about innovating. It's not about the flavor of the week or trying to be on the front page of the New York Times. Foreign policy is a matter of thinking long-term about what your real objectives are and trying to shape the world so that those objectives emerge without you having to exert a whole lot of force, right? Susan Strange used to call that structural power. It's the idea that you create a situation in which your opponents and your allies and the people who aren't quite sure which one they are have incentives to adjust their objectives to fit what you think the world ought to look like, so that and that's true mastery of the international system. The United States used to be able to play that kind of game, but we've broken the rules. We've rejected all of the constraints that we used to impose upon ourselves to try to give us some credibility so that we could make deals that would stick. And this administration is left with nothing but a lot of flashy bombs and a lot of rhetoric.
Hein, when you hear Lindsey Graham saying Cuba is next, we are marching through the world now, what do you hear there?
I hear echoes of Colonel Harry Summers in 1975 talking to a lieutenant colonel. Oh, no, it was captain. He was captain then, to a lieutenant colonel in the North Vietnamese army, where Colonel Summers, Captain Summers said to the colonel, you never beat us in any battle. We won all the battles. And the North Vietnamese colonel pondered for a second and said, "That's true, but also irrelevant." The point there being that it was not just about military might. It's much more about shaping expectations, what comes in the future, and where are you willing to to pay the costs of war to achieve your objectives. And it turned out in Vietnam that the United States suffered about 50,000 casualties, and the Vietnamese over 1 million. And what's going on at the moment in Iran, in my opinion, is again a question about shaping costs for the opponent. So both the United States and Israel are trying to shape costs for the Iranians, and Iran is trying to shape costs for the United States. And it's that balance, that will determine who will, or the expectation of what that balance will look like, who will actually be able to settle or set the terms.
I want to go back to that point about 1975, the idea of being confused. How did we lose a war when we didn't lose any battles?
Yeah, exactly.
And Tom Nichols, who has lectured at the Naval War College, wrote about this last week. He said that he fears that the Trump administration sees what he calls operational excellence, the excellence of an air campaign, the lightning strike that took out Khamenei and the leaders of Iran on the first day, and confuses that with what does it take to actually win long term here?
Well,
do you feel that way?
Well, yes, absolutely, and that's why the interaction between Summers and the North Vietnamese colonel was so interesting, right? It's what's going on is basically two sides grappling, and the question that lies behind it, and this is the public should notice because it is confusion which reigns rampant, is that you have to distinguish military victory from diplomatic victory. These are not the same things. You can win as many battles as you want to in Vietnam, but not win your diplomatic victory. And so you have to understand, and understand what it takes to get to the diplomatic victory. And as we've seen in the current administration, the emphasis of people like Hegseth is all about warriors and warfighting. It's all about military victory.
So you can bomb as many targets as you want.
Yeah.
But
They think. I'm pretty sure that Hegseth also thinks that in Vietnam the American military was hamstrung by the public, and otherwise they would have won. And that is just absurd, silly. Like, do these people think that the American costs should just bear any cost and pay any price and bear any burden for some objectives which the American people doesn't think it's worth it? It's just a complete misunderstanding of Clausewitz, right? The whole point. Sorry to go on a little bit about him, but Clausewitz is considered this great strategic thinking about the art of war and how war is fought. And he said, war is the continuation of politics with the admixture of other means, not, as often wrongly translated, it's the continuation of politics by other means. It means with other means. So it is politics. It's driving diplomacy, and then you use force to help shape that. And the American public needs to understand that these two things are different but interact.
Okay, so
Sorry.
Look, that's why we're here, is understanding the complexity of this moment at a time when the administration seems to be attempting to simplify everything. And so, Randy, let me build off Hein's point there with a couple of questions there. First of all, he referenced the Secretary of Defense, who has not only sort of beat his chest in weird ways that look overcompensating to me, but he has said that he's not going to tell the American public all of our goals here so as not to reveal too much about what we're going to do. I found that bizarre because no one is asking you, where are you striking tomorrow? What building do you plan to hit next? Where do you think the new Ayatollah is hiding? No one is asking that. They're asking, what are your goals here? What do you want to accomplish? How long do you think it will take? I think the American public deserves an answer there. So let me start with that. Do you think the administration owes the American public an answer to that question?
Well, so they're trying to claim that they're using strategic misdirection and so forth and
Yes.
being clever. But the fact of the matter is they have no idea what their objectives are. And we shouldn't, I don't think we should believe for a moment that they have a long-term plan about this or about anything else.
Heinz jumping out of his seat here.
No, I'm just one of I very much enjoy these occasions that I get to interact with Randy about these things. Don't you think that the Americans should let the Iranians know what their goals are so that the Iranians say, okay, we understand, we had enough, we'll give you that. Instead of
Or the Iranian people.
Yeah, you have to give wars. You have to give the other side a chance to say, "Okay, I accept I'm defeated, and I will roll over and I play nice." But if you don't even tell them that,
Well,
Yeah.
and the notion that what we're after is unconditional surrender is, of course, absurd. Unconditional surrender during World War II was a disaster that was cleverly foisted on American foreign policy by Joseph Stalin, right? And was very much in his interests that our strategy was unconditional surrender, so that we were tied in knots and couldn't be flexible. But of course, he was free to be flexible. Unconditional surrender is offers your opponent nothing, gives them no reason to make any concessions, and the only way that one could accomplish that would be to put the entire American army on the ground in Iran, which I don't think is going to happen.
the Pacific War was not an unconditional surrender, even though people tend to think of it. But the Japanese did not offer an unconditional surrender. They got to keep the emperor.
Yeah. So a couple of points, though. President Trump, I think 2 days into the war, said that they had heard from some of the surviving leadership in Iran, and the president told American reporters, well, I'm willing to get on a phone call and talk. There's still room to talk. Then a few days after that, well, we need unconditional surrender. Mm-hmm. So where did the talking go? And then he said, well, we might define our own view of unconditional surrender. So we might bomb enough targets and decide, well, that's surrender enough. We're out of here. He has said he wants freedom for the Iranian people. He has also said they have to do the work to rise up and take it, that there is a limit to how much the United States can do for them. And so I want you to respond to Hein's point there. When you don't communicate, not only to the foreign government that you're at war with, but to the people, because in this case, I do believe that a vast majority of the Iranian society would love to see their regime gone. I think that is
that's true.
That's hard to argue. But what are you signaling to them? How much work do they have to do? How much risk do they have to do? How much death do they have to take? And how long will you back them? I don't think anybody knows that. I don't think the people of Iran know that. Do you?
Right. And we've seen how this movie plays out before in Iraq, right? The first President George H.W. Bush pulled back and decided not to go on to Baghdad, not to change the regime, but then encouraged the Shiites in the south of Iraq, where the majority of the country, to rise up against Saddam Hussein. They did so, hoping that the United States might support them. They were massacred by the regime, and it set back any prospect of a popular uprising there for decades. So I suspect that the Shiites in Iran remember that history and are not inclined to trust American assurances, even if we tried to make them, that the United States would support them if they rose up against their leadership. I don't think that the United States is really in a point where it can send a credible signal, which would be accepted, which either the leadership or the people are going to take as very informative. So I don't think there's an easy solution to this problem, but I think that the real reason that we're not telling the American people what our objectives are is that the administration hasn't sorted it out yet, and Donald Trump might change his mind tomorrow. And so Hegseth and everybody else in the administration is trying to keep their heads down and not be wrong on this.
Okay. I'm going to take some phone calls and emails. I already see the phone ringing. Listeners, if you want to join the conversation, you can do that at 844-295-TALK. It's toll free, 844-295-8255, 263-WXXI if you call from Rochester, 263-9994. You can email the program, as always, connections@wxxi.org. Last week, we talked to a couple of Iranian Americans who said they are not fans of Trump, but they are desperate for change in regime. And I feel for them. I mean, I understand. I not from personal experience. I cannot empathize. I can sympathize with what they and their families and their communities have gone through. Tomorrow, we're going to talk to two different Iranian Americans who are desperate for, I think, different leadership in Iran, but who don't support this war, who don't trust the possible outcomes. The Iranian diaspora doesn't have a monolithic view on this, but clearly there's not a lot of love and not a lot of sadness that Khamenei has gone. I mean, we talked to Iranian Americans who got up in the middle of the night and started singing and dancing. So there's powerful emotion there. But, you know, Dr. Humans, when we've talked about how conflict ends, we've talked about who has leverage, what does each side see. If the Trump administration thought that initial strike that took out the Ayatollah was going to lead to some, maybe Reza Pahlavi gets installed or somebody else gets installed and they immediately become pro-Western. What we saw yesterday, this weekend, was the son of Ayatollah Khamenei is now installed as the supreme leader. And by all the reporting I've seen, he is more hardline and more extreme than his father was. He also just lost his father and apparently his wife and a son in the strike. President Trump said they had other possible successors in their minds lined up, but they accidentally killed them in the initial strike. They didn't think they were going to be part of this meeting house where everyone was. So 2 or 3 or 4 people who might have been the successor are dead now. So talk to me about what the Iranian, what you think is the right way for Americans to see this, because if you don't like President Trump, you might be cynical about this whole thing. But if you care about the freedom of the people, I would love to see democratic norms installed for the Iranian people. I would love to see them out from under the thumb of a brutal regime. How do you effectively sort of evaluate what to even root for and what looks possible? I don't know how to achieve those things, but I care about Iranian Americans and friends and the people of Iran, and I don't want them under the thumb of another oppressive regime, which looks like it could happen. And the President Trump said that could happen.
Well, I mean, first of all, my analysis of what's going on is not really based in any way on my approval or disapproval of the regime and its policies. I'm trying to understand, what is the underlying logic and where it leads me. Well, what's going on Iran is, for the Iranian people, is of course terrible. They're caught between a horrible regime on the one hand and an American and Israeli attack who they can't trust to have their best interest at heart in the long run. It's terrible. I mean, Randy just referred to what happened in the first Gulf War with the Shia. There's the talk now at the moment that the American administration wants to have the Kurds come in, and help overthrow the regime. The Kurds, who the United States and particularly Trump have, the word advisedly used in this context, betrayed at least twice. Said, yeah, screw you, you're on your own now. So it doesn't seem very much like the Kurds are in that, right? The wife of the Kurdish prime minister in parliament, or the speaker of parliament, I think, I don't know which of the two it is, wrote a long letter. So it's like, we're not going to fall for this again. You're gonna.
And then I think President Trump said, well, we're not doing that anyway. It was 24 hours later. He said, we're going to arm the Kurds. Now they're not part of the equation.
And talking about it, taking out all the other kind of potentially, pro-Western leaders in Iran, you took out the Ayatollah, and there are not a few Shia in the world who actually remember that the whole religion of Shiism is based on the death of Ali, who was, of course, the great leader and the successor to the Prophet Muhammad, and he was assassinated together with their family, his family. And they see the parallel right here. He is a martyr. And this leads me to two things. The first thing is that the Iranians will seek to impose costs on the United States so that the United States says, okay, that's enough. And you should not underestimate the possibility that there will be Shia terrorist attacks based on the fact that the leader of Shiism was killed, and he is the martyr, and he's the inheritor of Ali's mantle. And it's not necessarily about the regime. This is about 1,200 years ago. So there is going to be a surprising breadth or scope for terrorist attacks which impose costs on the United States. That worries me for the long run. Every country that is attacked or bombed first, the hardliners come together and people rally around the flag. That should not have surprised anybody that is going on. Two things that I want to add to that. First of all, from the United States perspective, the question is indeed what can they achieve, and the United States public will have to adjust whether or not, or make a judgment of whether those costs were, whether the achievement justified the cost, and said okay, or there could be domestic unrest in the United States. The midterms could really swing dramatically. But of course, and Randy would be the first to point out, it's not just the United States public that is looking at it, because there's heavy costs imposed on the allies.
Of course.
And they're going to say, was this worth it for our perspective? And they might change their policies in the long run also as well. The only way I can make sense of it, and I was wondering what Randy would think of it, is that yes, there was long-term talk about attacking Iran. There was planning. We all know that Bibi Netanyahu was very much gung-ho on doing this to create a legacy or to get actually re-elected and secure his future in Israel. And there was this opportunity which came up out of the blue to take them all out at once. And they jumped the gun. That's the only way any of this really makes sense to me.
Well, my reading of it is that they did advance the timetable by about 12 hours. They were planning on launching the bombing 12 hours later, but then they got a CIA report that they knew where Khamenei was going to be. There were going to be a number of other high-level military political leaders in the same spot, and so this was an opportunity. So instead of attacking in the dark when we normally attack, they attacked early in the morning.
I thought it was a week. I thought it was a week. So,
I've seen a couple of different reports at different times that moved these things around, but the latest I saw suggested that it had been intended to be 12 hours later.
And say what you want about people who want to sort of burnish their own history or rewrite history. So I don't know how true this is, but under the Biden administration, former Secretary of State Blinken said this weekend that Israel had asked the United States many times, and not only asked, told the United States, we're going to be striking Iran, so you better get with us here. And Blinken said every time, whether it was Obama or Biden in the White House, that was brought to the table, it was, we're going to call their bluff here. They're not going to do this without us, and we don't think this is the right thing right now, and it didn't happen. Secretary of State Rubio said last week that one of the justifications for this was that Israel came to the Trump administration and said, we are going to be striking Iran. We want you with us. And the Trump team said, well, if they do that, we're probably going to get hit, or our bases in the Middle East are going to get hit by Iran. We might as well get in there first. And they went with them. I mean, and Rubio essentially said that. They tried to walk it back the next day, but he said that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect segue to the thing that we have to discuss also, and we haven't done. I mean, the United States is not fighting on its own, right? It's fighting with Israel. And it may be the case that the United States is not entirely sure what its goals are. Then we should ask ourselves, what are the goals of Israel? And there is lots of talk all over the place. There is a little bit of a gambling for resurrection, that Netanyahu fears elections. There's lots of talk that Israel is expanding into southern Syria, into southern Lebanon. It wants weak, fragmented states all around. So, if Israel says we're going to take out the Khamenei as well, and then the next one, and the next one, clearly means that they don't want a particularly stable Iran. Right? It may mean that they do want this balkanization or this breaking up of Iran into fragmented states, so they don't have to worry about.
At the most, you couldn't say that Israel has not come out and said that their goal is a democratic Iran, that the people are prioritized. That is not their intention.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, and you have to look at the policy elsewhere. I mean, it is they're going into southern Syria to create a buffer for a buffer for a buffer. They're doing similar things in southern Lebanon. You can understand the logic of some of this, but I mean, it seems that Bibi is quite happy with having weak states all around him. And then, surprisingly, a lot of people point to Mohammed bin Zayed, the leader of the UAE, who is similarly inclined to fragment the states in the Middle East to increase his own influence.
So, before I go to some phone calls and some emails, which we'll get to in just a second here, Dr. Stone, is there a way that you see this? And ending is the wrong word. I mean, the consequences of this are going to be unfolding as far as the eye can see. So when I say ending, I mean the active war campaign ending. Is there a way that you can see it resulting in something that truly makes the world safer and makes the world better for the Iranian people?
I don't think you make the world safer by fighting wars in the Middle East. I just don't think that is a possible outcome of this kind of scenario. You make the world objectively more unstable, more dangerous place. And if the Iranian regime is more unstable, there will be a proliferation of non-state actors who, as Hein was pointing out, will engage in more terrorist activities around the world. And you don't make friends and influence people by dropping bombs on their houses. That's just not a strategy that works. What it might accomplish is setting back the regime's nuclear program. That seems quite plausible, that if you destroy enough infrastructure, you make it really hard for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon for some period of time. You also reinforce their determination to develop whatever tools they possibly can to hit you some point in the future. And instead of deterrence, which is what they've been thinking about doing, they're going to be thinking about revenge, right? Because deterrence is clearly not possible for them. I think one interesting implication of all of this is that the United States has now shown in the course of a couple months that we could seize the leader of one country, Venezuela, and we could assassinate the leader of another country, Iran. And that strategy is attractive if you think that the problem for U.S. foreign policy is these obstreperous leaders, right, who have too much power in their own countries. And if we could just get them replaced by somebody else, we could make a deal with them. And in personalistic dictatorships like Russia, you might think that might actually work. If you were able to eliminate Vladimir Putin, then maybe you could make a deal with his successor, whoever it was, because Putin has gotten himself stuck in a bad war in Ukraine. The successor might be willing to make a deal that Putin can't afford to make. So that's a kind of an attractive strategy. That's terrifying to people who are at the top of personalistic dictatorships. That's terrifying to Vladimir Putin. It's terrifying to Xi Jinping in China. So these leaders have to think about, how do you deter the United States if they have access to this technology? Now, it's easier to do it in Venezuela and in Iran than it is in Russia, and much easier than it would be to do it in China. But the CIA has assets everywhere. And this wouldn't be the first time that foreign leaders have overestimated the capacity of the CIA to do dirty tricks in their backyard, right? So this means that in order to protect themselves, they have to somehow cultivate a deterrent capability that would deter someone like Donald Trump. That probably means going after Donald Trump himself and his family, which means that they have to develop greater covert capacity within the United States. And the attempts to fight back against their effort to develop that covert capacity will be seen as weakening deterrence that protects their leader, right? So we now have an arms race in the intelligence services, which was one of the things we managed to finally put to rest with the end of the Cold War. And that was a very good thing that we managed to put that to rest.
I mean, if you will allow me, talking about nuclear weapons, there has been, Bibi Netanyahu has been saying since 1992 the Iranians are going to build nuclear weapons.
They're a month away. They're 2 weeks away.
And everybody still says, Iranian nuclear weapons. To be quite honest, I've always been somewhat skeptical. Khomeini and Khamenei have said, there was a fatwa, nuclear weapons are un-Islamic. That was, fatwa is a big deal.
You trust that?
Well, everybody, that's what everybody always says. Like, do you trust that? I take a fatwa relatively seriously. If you break it, it's a big deal. But even if it's just only 10 or 15% relevant, now you have a new leader who can say, like, it's the survival of the Shia state, of the Iranian state that's at stake. The Islamic Republic is at stake. We have to reassess our options. The daring strategy of the H's, the Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi, is insufficient. And the only thing that we can do is race to nukes. And you can be sure there's people in the Revolutionary Guard who are saying, let's race to nukes. So have you increased the likelihood? Let me just say, I do believe that the fatwa have some weight. Let me say that there is an argument to be made that their likelihood or the need to produce nuclear weapons is perceived as to be higher among influential elites in Iran than before.
In other words, if this regime isn't entirely annihilated, their desire to move even more quickly toward nuclear weapons as a means of survival
is deterrent.
Accelerated.
Yeah, it's the only deterrent. Everything else has failed, as Randy just pointed out. What do you have?
After our only break, we'll come back with Dr. Stone and Dr. Humans from the University of Rochester. Really international experts with long resumes on understanding war and conflict. And we're going to get some listener feedback, questions, comments, phone calls, emails on the other side of this only break.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. Proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, focused on the news, issues, and trends that shape the lives of listeners in the Rochester and Finger Lakes regions. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Let's move quickly. A lot of feedback. Greg in San Diego first. Hi, Greg. Go ahead.
Hi. Things a few weeks ago were really fairly stable, or as stable as things in the Middle East can be. Now every corner is in chaos. Did we go to war? Did we invade Iran to protect Israel from being attacked? Well, now they are being attacked by Hezbollah. Did we do it to protect the oil supply? Well, the supply of oil to the entire world is now less secure than it was before the war started. Okay, yes, we did get rid of Khamenei in Iran, but it's even more chaotic there now. There are the Kurds who are being encouraged to fight. And I don't think that either Russia or China will just let Iran fade away or fall into total chaos, that they will keep them supplied with missiles. The Gulf states who were strongly, pro-American now have to be wondering, do we really want to be so closely allied? I'm speaking of Kuwait, Bahrain, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, have been basically pro-Western. Now they have taken a lot of destruction, and as far as oil prices, God only knows. That's going to affect the entire world. So I see nothing that has been achieved but a whole lot of chaos and questions from China and Russia's reaction to, what is going to happen to Israel. It's a very small country. It doesn't take a whole lot of missiles to destroy a lot of it. And with Hezbollah attacking from the north, I don't think any government really knows what to do at this point. They're still trying to figure out, where is it all going?
Greg, thank you. Randy, you want to start with a response? Go ahead.
Well, one thing that Greg mentioned, China, and one has to wonder how this affects China's long-term calculations about when and whether to invade Taiwan. Xi Jinping has made it pretty clear that he intends to reunify China and Taiwan. This has been prevented by a kind of tenuous deterrence that the United States has maintained. Although we don't officially recognize Taiwan, we still make ambiguous statements, and there have been a couple of militarized disputes between China and the United States over the decades that have indicated the United States was prepared to defend Taiwan. The Biden administration made it very clear, yes, we will fight to defend Taiwan. And the Trump administration has made it very fuzzy. And if the United States gets itself heavily involved in an operation in the Middle East, then its ability to do anything else in the world becomes compromised. And so many of these other relationships that are fragile could crumble because we've tied ourselves down.
Not just in Iran, but also Venezuela, perhaps Cuba next here. Our attention is in a lot of different places, Dr. Humans.
Well, I wanted to reply to what Greg said. I mean, as an unusually well-informed American on what's going on in the Middle East, I mean, I think what he says and how he looks at what's going on is shared by a lot of people. They look on the ground and they say, like, it's a big mess. And the thing I want to emphasize to him and all the listeners here is that it's perhaps a bit of a mistake or, too much emphasis to look at what's happening at the moment now. You got to look at how these actions are supposed to shape the expectations of the other actors in the future. It's all about what you think is going to happen in the future that will then make you actually adapt your behavior in the present to either forestall a bad future or welcome a better future. So we have to think about, as Randy just pointed out, how do these events shape expectations of what's possible in the future and what is not possible? And that's wide open, indeed. That is wide open. Because as he pointed out, Hezbollah is now attacking in the north, and people say Hezbollah is decimated. It's all true, but because Hezbollah is doing this, Israel has to move some forces and intelligence and ships out of their focus on Iran and refocus them on southern Lebanon.
This is from Charles, a defense of the American operation in Iran. He says, I believe it's worth mentioning to your listeners that the United States military has systematically killed members of a regime which has spent decades oppressing women, oppressing gay people, and anyone who did not share their religion, not to mention barracks bombings, hostage taking, and creating IEDs and sponsoring terrorism worldwide. That is from Charles. Hein?
That's all true, and that is, bad guys. I wish there were fewer bad people in the world. The question is, will the next people be any better? And they could very well be worse. And that's a gamble that you have to go in with open eyes, and you have some kind of ideas of what is possible. It seems, from what you earlier suggested, that the American administration was not as careful because they killed people who thought they could work with in the future. So things can get worse. Things can always get worse.
By the way, the way that President Trump described that was, he said we were too successful in the opening strike of the war, killing not just Ayatollah Khamenei, but also possible successors. So that's an interesting definition of success.
Well, and I think we should make a distinction, again, between personalistic dictatorships and other kinds of authoritarian regimes. Iran is not a personalistic dictatorship. Although the Ayatollah has tremendous power and is the preeminent religious leader as well as the most important executive and legislative and judicial figure in the government. He has a lot of power. But they have a collective leadership body which has a pretty clear sense of their objectives. There's a lot of consensus there. And there's some depth to their leadership. They anticipated after last June's attacks, which already were supposed to have eliminated Iran's capacity to build a nuclear weapon, right? We already did this and back in June last year, and that was supposed to solve the problem.
They said it was totally annihilated.
Yeah, now we've got to do it all over again. So they set up a response which would be they would have 4 levels of replacements in place for anyone who was killed. So they anticipated that their leadership might be decapitated, but they ensured that the policy thrust would continue. And I think this is a regime that has a lot of staying power. The Revolutionary Guards are the most powerful organized force within the country. They have the capacity to do an awful lot of repression.
And they're true believers.
That's right, and they just brutally repressed a widespread popular uprising in the country, killing some estimated 6,000 or 7,000 people in the process.
Could have been more.
May have been more. It's going to be a really difficult regime to dislodge. So if you want to change that regime, you have to put the American army in Iran. And I don't think the country wants to do that. I think it would also be a profound mistake, given the current state of the world, to commit ourselves to a long-term failing war yet again in the Middle East, when we have much more important interests at stake in other parts of the world.
Well, the argument is now that we're going to send some special forces and Israeli special forces, and we're going to dig 2 or 3 kilometers into the sites we have just blown up to get the we're going to send special forces in together with the Israelis, and they are going to dig through the mountains we just blew up to take the 60 kilos of enriched uranium.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go get it.
Good luck. But I don't think that's. I don't think that's the end all and the be all. I don't. So Iran has the capability. They have the knowledge, and I know that Israel has been trying to assassinate nuclear physicists in Iran as much as they can to destroy that knowledge. But there is that knowledge base, and that's. I don't think you're going to wipe that out.
So before I grab one more call, Jack, hang there for 1 second. Hein, what do you think this is about from Israel's perspective? Do you take Netanyahu at his word that this is about a dangerous regime that would use a nuclear weapon the moment it had one on Israel?
Well, I don't think that Iran would do that, but maybe Bibi believes that. I do think this is a cabinet stocked with a couple of true believers about Greater Israel. Seeing this is the opportunity to free themselves of the constraints of any constraints they perceive in the Middle East once and for all. I think that is with Ben Gvir and of course with Smotrich and with other people, and a large majority of the Israeli public as well. I don't think that the overwhelming urge for the Israeli public is to expand territorially. There's a small group who does want to and does want to settle the land. But I do think that Israel wants to say we are free of constraints, we are the regional hegemon, and we get to call the shots.
I think the average American, this is probably me in that category until recently, if you're only listening to Netanyahu, I would urge you to read what Ben Gvir and Smotrich and others in that leadership have said. They have extreme views.
Yes.
On the world,
Yeah.
and on Israel's place in the world. And I think it's valuable to at least understand who is leading some of that policy and decision making. Dr. Stone, what do you think this is about from the Trump administration's perspective? I mean, do you feel like is it the nuclear regime?
I think that they have a list of objectives that they would like to achieve around the world. And they have no particular hierarchy among those objectives. And they have opportunistically pull one of those objectives when it suits Donald Trump's mercurial temper. He moves around so fast, I think his advisors can't keep track of how to explain this as a strategy. Right? It's kind of like when he was doing the Apprentice show, and they would have a script for him that included who was supposed to win and who was supposed to lose, and he would mess it up because he liked to change things, and they'd have to rewrite the script, in order to catch up with him. His advisors are doing the same thing. They're trying to keep up with this bull in the china shop who loves shiny objects, right? And he's just he sees one and he just has to go get it, and he doesn't want to listen to anyone telling him, well, that's really a bad idea. That'll have long-term consequences that are going to be disastrous, or it's going to tie us down in these various ways, or there are constraints. Oh, there's this thing called international law. I don't want to hear any of that.
Yeah.
Just explain to the public why everything I did was brilliant.
But I mean, what Randy points is the possibility that we haven't examined yet. Let's say this is a great success. Let's say that Iran buckles down and says, yes, Grand Ayatollah Trump, you were right all along. You get to pick our next successor. Trump is going to be emboldened, and he's going to gamble even bigger stakes next time. And I am seriously worried about what that would mean for the world.
All right, Jack in Greece. Hi, Jack. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Evan. Hey, I haven't heard the whole entire conversation, but I'm going to come back to it's my belief at this point that Donald Trump decided to do this because he was heavily influenced by Netanyahu. My opinion is that Netanyahu can live with chaos in Iran because they've eliminated the threat of Iran's ability to support all these terror arms that they have. Hamas has been very weakened, and he can live with that. But for us, you mentioned, how do you see this ending? Well, my opinion is the greatest military success does not destroy an idea. These people in Iran, I mean, I still remember these people are, to use the word fervent is an understatement. These people, the way they supported the Ayatollah coming back to their country, starting their Islamic State. I mean, it's nice that there's a lot of people that seem to want to support possibly a democracy. But on the other hand, there's a lot of fervent believers that have the weapons in Iran, and I don't see us going in. So you mentioned, how do you see this ending? Well, in my opinion, I think Israel, at least from Netanyahu's standpoint, will feel stronger because they've eliminated that existential threat of Iran. For us, it's hard to believe that there'll be less trust in the United States, but I think we've managed to do that. We were in the middle of negotiations, supposedly, that were going very well. And then how do we end those negotiations? Well, we killed them. We bombed them. So, and how does it also end? Well, I think Donald Trump can just decide at any point, well, we've totally obliterated them, just like they did when they went in and they blew up the nuclear stockpile, what was back in June or whenever it was.
Yep.
They said they obliterated it. So he could do the same thing and say, we're walking away, we're done. That's the way I see it.
Jack, I appreciate that. We're down to our last minute, about 30 seconds apiece. Randy Stone, I think Jack echoes the idea that there's still a lot of chaos here. What are you looking at next?
Well, how we end this depends on what the Trump administration, which means Donald Trump, and his conversation with himself, decides he wants to do. And I think it can go very, very badly if he decides to double down and expand the U.S. presence in Iran and actually try to change the regime. I think that will be tempting to him, and it would be really disastrous. If he decides to withdraw instead, I think we've still made the Middle East a more dangerous place. But at least we don't have the damage of a long-term land war.
But Iran gets a voice. It's not just whether Trump says he will walk away. Trotsky tried to do that in 1917. Says, to the Germans, we're going to walk away, and the Germans were said, like, what? What the hell do you mean? And then came back and fought longer. I mean, there is room for Iran to decide and for the Shia worldwide to decide to inflict greater costs on the U.S.
It's also the fog of war, and there's so much that could happen. Secretary Hegseth and the president have tried to downplay the deaths of Americans. They yelled at the media for asking questions about the dead Americans so far. If you see that number dramatically rise, there's any number of things that could happen, and they seem to think that that's impossible. I want to thank our guests, Dr. Hein Goemans and Dr. Randy Stone, for being here. Thank you very much. Randy, come back and talk to us about multinational order soon, if you could.
Will do.
He's got a new book coming out, but I know we're going to talk to both of these gentlemen soon. We always appreciate their time. From all of us at Connections, thank you for being with us. We are back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.